Ladies and gentlemen, set your alarms, mark your calendars, and pour yourself a strong cup of coffee because we have news that is going to reshape the entire landscape of women's professional basketball. At approximately 2:30 in the morning Eastern Time, while most of America was deep in sleep, history was being written in a conference room somewhere. The WNBA and the WNBA Players Association have reached a verbal agreement on a new collective bargaining agreement. And if the details emerging are anywhere close to accurate, we are witnessing the beginning of a brand new era for the sport. Let that sink in for a moment. A verbal agreement. The handshake has happened. The conversation that many thought would drag on for weeks, perhaps months, has apparently reached a conclusion in the dead of night. This is monumental. This is unprecedented. This is exactly what the league needed at exactly the right time. Now, before we pop the champagne and start celebrating in the streets, we need to have a serious conversation about what this agreement actually means, what it contains, and whether the 2026 season is actually going to tip off on schedule. Because the devil, as they always say, is buried deep in the details. Annie Costabile broke this story, boots on the ground, first to report the news that sent shockwaves through the basketball world. And the early details that have emerged are nothing short of revolutionary for a league that has spent decades fighting for financial legitimacy. First and foremost, the salary system is now directly tied to revenue growth. This is seismic. This is not just a bump in pay. This is a fundamental restructuring of how players are compensated relative to the success of the league itself. When the league grows, the players grow. When television ratings climb, when merchandise flies off the shelves, when arenas sell out night after night, the players see that money reflected in their paychecks. That is partnership. That is investment in mutual success. And here is where it gets truly eye-opening. The Supermax salary will now be 7 figures. 7 figures. We are talking about a minimum of $1 million for the top tier of talent.
All right, breaking news into SportsCenter this morning. The WNBA and the WNBA PA have agreed in principle on the terms for a new collective bargaining agreement. Alexa Philippou joins us right now on SportsCenter. Alexa, you've been all over this story from the beginning. What more can you tell us?
Yeah, Mina, both sides verbally agreed to those terms for a new collective bargaining agreement around 2:20 a.m. this morning after over 100 hours over this past week of bargaining. And though they could not share the exact terms that they did agree to until a term sheet is finalized, the sentiment around the players was that this is going to be a transformational deal that will change what the league looks like, not just now, but in the present moving forward, or in the future moving forward. Union President Nneka Ogwumike shared with us that this is, in her view, the first time that players will come into this league and, quote, not have a sense of lack. In a statement, she was also able to share that this revenue sharing system that will be in this new collective bargaining agreement will drive exponential growth and salary cap, that average compensation for players is going to exceed $500,000. You're going to see increased, enhanced benefits, professional standards. And Brianna Stewart, who's also a member of the executive committee, said that this will be transformational. And it also is a great news to share that the women's basketball will be back. The WNBA will be back this summer. Kathy Engelbert, the WNBA commissioner, said that the season will proceed as planned. So that means the regular season will start as intended May 8th. That means the preseason will also not have any disruptions, as was feared potentially if negotiations had gone on. But there's still a lot of business left to be done. So this new collective bargaining agreement must be ratified first. That could take a few weeks. But then once that is completed, then the league can finally hold a 2-team expansion draft for the Toronto and Portland teams that are coming into the league. And then free agency has to be held for over 100 free agents. That all you can expect to happen in April.
Yeah, some positive news and a lot of progress being made in the WNBA between them and...
For a sport that has historically struggled to pay its stars what they could earn overseas, this represents a quantum leap forward. This is the WNBA finally stepping into the arena of serious professional sports compensation. But wait, there is more. The 2026 salary cap is projected to land at $6.5 million or above. Think about what that means for roster construction, for team building, for the ability of franchises to retain their homegrown talent while also pursuing free agents. This is a salary cap that allows for ambition. This is a salary cap that allows for dynasties to be built and sustained without sacrificing financial stability. The implications for individual players are staggering. Reports are already circulating that Caitlin Clark, the phenomenon who single-handedly reignited national interest in women's basketball, is projected to earn around $500,000 in 2026, $500,000. For context, her rookie contract was nowhere near that figure. This is not just a raise, this is a transformation of what it means to be a professional basketball player in this league. Average player compensation is being raised to a huge margin from previous earnings. We are not talking about incremental improvements here. We are talking about a fundamental reshaping of the economic landscape. Players who previously had to decide between staying in America and chasing bigger paychecks overseas will now have a legitimate reason to stay home. That is good for the players, good for the fans, and good for the long-term health of the sport. WNBPA President Nneka Ogwumike released a statement that captures the magnitude of this moment. She stated that for the first time, player salaries are tied to a truly meaningful share of league revenue. Notice that word, meaningful. This is not a token gesture. This is not a symbolic nod toward fairness. This is a structural change that will drive exponential growth in the salary cap and increase average compensation beyond $500,000. But the agreement does not stop at salaries. It raises the professional standard across facilities, staffing, and support. For too long, WNBA players have dealt with substandard accommodations, travel arrangements that would make a minor league baseball player wince, and practice facilities that pale in comparison to their male counterparts. This agreement apparently addresses those concerns head-on. If the reports are accurate, we are looking at a comprehensive overhaul of what it means to be treated like a professional in this league. The agreement also strengthens housing provisions. It enhances retirement benefits. It expands resources for family planning and parental leave. These are the kinds of provisions that recognize players as complete human beings, not just assets to be exploited during their prime athletic years. This is a league that is finally acknowledging that its players have lives outside of basketball, that they have families, that they have futures beyond the final buzzer. Nneka Ogwumike put it best when she said, "This agreement redefines what it means to be a professional in this league." That is not hyperbole. That is not marketing speak. If these provisions hold up under scrutiny, that is simply a statement of fact. Now, let us talk about the timeline, because this is where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean potentially problematic. According to the reports, the expansion draft, qualifying offers, and free agency will occur in early to mid-April. Training camp is scheduled to begin April 19th. The preseason is set to start April 25th, and the regular season is slated to tip off on May 8th. Do the math with me here. Free agency happens in early to mid-April. Training camp starts April 19th. That means teams will have a matter of days, perhaps a week at most, to complete their roster construction before camp begins. Then they have 6 days from the start of training camp to the first preseason game. 6 days. And then roughly 2 weeks until the regular season begins. That is an incredibly compressed timeline. That is asking players to learn new systems, to build chemistry with new teammates, to get their bodies in peak physical condition, all while operating on a schedule that leaves virtually no margin for error. Can it be done? Perhaps. Is it ideal? Absolutely not. The report indicates that the season will start as normal according to league sources, but there is a reason to be skeptical. The original deadline for these negotiations was March 10th. That deadline came and went without resolution. The fact that it took until 2:30 in the morning on a subsequent date to reach even a verbal agreement suggests that these talks were contentious, that the gap between the two sides was significant, that compromise did not come easily. And we still do not have all the details. The full terms of this agreement have not been released to the public. We do not know the exact revenue sharing percentages. There has been speculation about whether the players received the full percentage they were seeking. Based on the statement from Agumake, it appears they got something meaningful, but whether it matches their initial demands remains unclear. What we do know is that this agreement still needs to be voted upon by the players and by the WNBA Board of Governors in the coming weeks. That means this is not a done deal yet. That means there is still room for this to fall apart. Verbal agreements are wonderful, but they are not contracts. Until the ink is dry on paper, until the votes are counted and the ratification is official, we are operating in a state of hopeful uncertainty. But let us assume, for the sake of optimism, that this agreement holds. Let us assume that the players vote yes and the governors approve the terms. What does this mean for the future of the WNBA? It means the league has recognized that the moment is now. It means someone in that room, whether it was the players, the owners, or both, looked at the landscape and understood that the college players coming into the league deserve to enter a professional ecosystem that matches their talent level. The next generation of stars should not have to fight the same battles that previous generations fought. They should inherit a league that respects them from day one. And make no mistake, the timing of this agreement is not coincidental. There are elite college players on the verge of entering the WNBA. The league cannot afford to have a labor dispute hanging over its head while trying to market its next wave of transcendent talent. A lockout, a strike, a prolonged negotiation dragging into the season, any of those scenarios would have been catastrophic for momentum that took decades to build. The league is thinking about those incoming players. The league is thinking about the fans who finally showed up. The league is thinking about the television ratings that exploded and the arenas that sold out and the merchandise that flew off the shelves. You cannot build on that foundation if the foundation is cracked by labor strife. You cannot capitalize on a generational talent like Caitlin Clark if she is sitting at home instead of playing in front of adoring crowds. This agreement, if it holds, represents a recognition of reality. The WNBA has never been in a better position to succeed. The investment is there, the interest is there, the talent is there. What was missing was the structure to support sustainable growth. This CBA appears to provide that structure. The fact that salaries are now tied to revenue growth is perhaps the most important long-term provision. It creates alignment between players and ownership. When the league succeeds, everyone succeeds. When ratings climb, salaries climb. When expansion teams join and bring new markets and new revenue streams, the pie gets bigger for everyone. That is smart business. That is the kind of arrangement that prevents future labor disputes because everyone has a stake in growing the enterprise together. And the expansion resources are worth mentioning. The league is preparing for growth. New cities are coming. New franchises are on the horizon. New markets mean new fans, new revenue, and new opportunities for players to establish themselves as cornerstone pieces of emerging programs. The timing could not be better. The provisions for family planning and parental leave deserve special attention. For too long, women in professional sports have faced impossible choices between their careers and their personal lives. This agreement apparently acknowledges that athletes are people first. They can be mothers and superstars simultaneously. They can plan for families without sacrificing their professional aspirations. That is progressive. That is humane. That is the kind of policy that will attract and retain talent for years to come. Now, we wait. We wait for the votes. We wait for the ratification. We wait for the official announcement that this verbal agreement has become binding reality. The coming weeks will tell us whether the optimism is warranted or whether there are still obstacles to overcome. But for now, in this moment, the WNBA stands on the precipice of something extraordinary. The league that struggled for relevance, that fought for every dollar of investment, that watched its stars leave for overseas contracts because the money was simply better elsewhere. That league appears to have finally arrived. The 2026 season looks like it will happen. The players look like they will be compensated fairly. The future looks brighter than it ever has. The deal is done. At least verbally. The handshake happened at 2:30 in the morning while America slept. And when America woke up, the landscape of women's professional basketball had fundamentally changed. This is the moment the WNBA has been waiting for. This is the moment the players have been fighting for. This is the moment the fans have been hoping for. And if everything goes according to plan, May 8th will mark the beginning of a season unlike any that came before it. The revolution is here. The question is whether everyone is ready for what comes next. Tell me what you think in the comments. Are you excited about this agreement? Do you think the timeline is realistic? Let me know. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, because this story is just beginning and you are going to want to be here for every development. Peace.